Morning, everybody. Almost ready here. We'll dive right into Romeo and Juliet real soon. They didn't make it. Sorry. Surprise, surprise. All right, not much of an agenda today because we are wrapping up the quarter. You guys can hear me, by the way, right? Okay. Had a microphone problem yesterday, but I think I've sorted it out. Okay, so no grammar, no vocab going on. No concerning writing. Okay, I think all of you guys are here to find this, but last chance to turn that personal narrative. If you've had issues finishing that, I don't think that applies to any of you. I think we're all good there. So our grades are, mostly looking just fine, which is great. So we got Romeo and Juliet Act 5 study guide that was due last night, and it's been checked. We are going to obviously go over that in class. So let me switch over to No Fear Shakespeare here. Get you guys on a grid where I can see you. Okay, that should be good. All right, can you guys access, some of you probably already thought of that, but if you haven't, go ahead, access your questions so you can follow along, and or hopefully, I'd love to hear some new voices, maybe who have attended a lot of live sessions but aren't quite up to 100% your participation, and get that in at the last minute, because this is kind of our last opportunity. We'll touch base tomorrow, and I think Thursday I'll probably just kind of give you a break from live sessions for those of us who have finished up everything. We're not really going to have, and we've done some, good bit of work reading this and doing these study guides and talking through them and stuff. We're not going to have like a comprehensive test over Romeo and Juliet. The first test we're going to have outside of like vocab and grammar will be like more of a skills test that just kind of tests reading comprehension that we've been practicing in general, and that'll be like maybe a week after the end of the quarter, if you were wondering. Okay, you guys got your stuff. So as Act 5 begins, which you can see on my text on the screen share here, what premonition? Do we know what premonition is? Premonition is like a kind of a vision of the future, almost a might be kind of a delusion, might be end up correct, but what kind of premonition does Romeo have at the beginning of this scene? I'm looking for someone other than our usual suspects, although I really appreciate our usual suspects. And otherwise I will go to our usual suspects. Anybody else we haven't heard from as much who wants to answer that first question there? Okay. Roman, you go ahead this time.
Romeo had a dream about, or where Juliet found him dead and revived him with a kiss.
Mm-hmm. And that ends up to be both kind of foreshadowing and kind of ironic, right? Because it doesn't turn out as well, even though it does seem to be. And that continues to give us this feeling that there is something supernatural and fate related going on here, right? Like, does Shakespeare ever totally convince us that no matter what they do, they're not going to make it? Not really, right? Because we see them kind of make rash decisions, and the friar kind of gets sucked into it, and the nurse for a little while gets sucked into it. So it's kind of in between, right? But then you do have this feeling that, God, it seems like Romeo's trying to do the right thing, and Juliet isn't some horrible person. And it does seem like things keep getting messed up, right? So it's up to us to decide. I think Shakespeare kind of leaves it But little clues like that kind of give us this feeling, right? Maybe something kind of is in control. Depends on what you believe in, right? Okay, so this is the horrible coincidence that happens here. What news does supposed news does Balthazar bring, and how does this disrupt the friar's plan? It's a pivotal moment where you just want to scream, "No, it's not true. You got it wrong." What did Balthazar? Go ahead, Ella.
Okay, so the news that Balthazar brings to Romeo is that Juliet is dead, and
Hmm.
this could disrupt the plan because Romeo actually believes that she is dead, and that could lead him to not going to the tomb and finding her, or it could potentially lead to him killing himself.
Yes, and that's what it does, right? Which is why he goes to the apothecary next. Now, can you or anybody else explain how that is a huge example of dramatic irony there, as are many other situations of the play? Are we getting this concept? Go ahead, Ella.
So it would be an example of dramatic irony, is because we know that Juliet's not actually dead; she's just in a dead-like coma, whereas he doesn't know that at all. He just thinks that she's actually dead.
Right. So he's supposed to. That's what the friar's telling him, right? But he does not get there in time, right? It disrupts the friar. And do we have a question? Okay, we do have a question that kind of uncovers what happens there, right? But Balthazar gets there first, and Balthazar doesn't know any better. He's trying to let Romeo what he believes and what Juliet's entire family believes, is true. Okay, so Romeo decides at that point that he is going to go, and this kind of relates back to the foreshadowing with Friar Lawrence again, right? When he's looking at all of his herbs and plants and stuff, he talked about how some of them slay all senses but the heart, which is something Juliet took. And then he talks about others which are just outright poison, right? And so Romeo goes and gets essentially some poison, right? From this. So an apothecary is like it would have been like their version of a pharmacist, right? In a primitive way. Um, and he doesn't want to, right? Because he relates that it's the penalty is death for anybody who sells this, right? Because why does he have it? Well, I don't know. Maybe they use it for pests or something, but he doesn't want to give it to him, right? And Romeo convinces him to give it to him because he notices that the apothecary is what? Did you catch this? It's kind of a detailed question there. What does he notice by looking at the apothecary? What does he really need? Madeline.
He notices that he's poor.
Yeah, from his clothes and his demeanor that he's poor, right? And then he kind of makes a dark joke about how money that he's given him, that money is the real poison, just kind of making a dark joke about observation about greed and what it makes people do and things like that. It's making the apothecary give him the stuff that he shouldn't because he needs the money so badly, which is kind of unrelated to the plot really, but that's what happens there. Okay, that takes us into scene 2. So we get to Friar Lawrence's cell. Let me get a table of contents here. Juggling my screens around. Ooh. Okay, so Friar Lawrence says to himself, "Oh, this same should be the voice of Friar John. Welcome from Mantua. What says Romeo? Give me his letter." And then what do we hear? Friar John tells him that what? Why was he unable to deliver it? Seems like kind of a ridiculous coincidence again here, right? Hold on a sec. Got to juggle my screens again here. Avion, go ahead.
He couldn't deliver the letter because he was walking around sick people, and then they had thought he was sick, so they had put him in a house and like boarded it up so he couldn't get out.
Good. They actually like locked up the city and wouldn't let any more people in. So apparently Balthazar got in right before that happened, right? Now what's this a historical reference to? What would have been going on in Europe during the Middle Ages a couple different times that like wiped out a whole bunch of people?
The plague.
Yeah, good. Bubonic plague, the Black Death, often just referred to as the plague, right? And so they were really, well, we can relate to this a little bit, right? So they were so scared of anybody bringing in germs, right? And they didn't even understand it scientifically very well then, that they shut the city out. Now, again, this seems like fate, right? Like the coincidence of Balthazar being able to get in and then the city getting shut up right after that, just in time to keep Friar John out with the news that would have let Romeo know that everything is okay. Ah, it kills me. Okay, maybe fate is in control. So Friar Lawrence's new quote unquote plan. Okay, so Friar John brings back the letter, right? And he says, and Friar Lawrence, of course, like, oh my God, oh my God. And he's probably not only worried, but in all seriousness, he is probably freaking out because this was all his plan, right? It was of dear import, he says, right? Now I must go to the monument alone. Within this 3 hours, fair Juliet will wake. She will be shrewd me much that Romeo hath no notice of these accidents, but I will write again to Mantua and keep her at myself. So he's going to try to write, right? But we know that Romeo's already taken off. That's not going to work, right? So all kinds of horrible stuff could happen here, right? And so the timing is just, Juliet could wake up anytime. Romeo is on his way there with poison. And we understand why Romeo has bought this poison, right? What is he essentially thinking? Well, if I can't be with Juliet alive, then I'm gonna what? Anybody?
Be with her dead.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a dark thought, right? A desperate dark thought. All right, so last scene of the play, you guys. We've finished Romeo and Juliet. Juggling with screens again. Get back to scene 3. And it starts right off with, oh, what about this guy, Paris? We've forgotten all about him, haven't we? He's totally in the dark. Come to visit, we would presume, his fiance, who has passed away. He doesn't know any better. This poor sucker. He doesn't know what's going on, does he? And then this horrible thing happens. So he's there to visit Juliet, who he thinks is dead, of course. In lines 25 through 32, what strange excuse does Romeo give his servant for wanting to go? So it shows Paris, right? Sees Juliet. And then outside, we hear someone else, right? And Romeo is outside with his guy, right? His servant, Balthasar. He says, take this letter early in the morning, see it to deliver to thy Lord and Father. Give me the light. And he gives kind of a strange excuse. As Romeo gives to servant for wanting to go in alone. What does he say that he's going to do in there? It's totally made up, right? Because he doesn't want him to think that, oh, yeah, I'm just going to go in here and kill myself, right? Elizabeth, was that a hand there, or are you just scratching your head? Yeah, go ahead.
To take the ring from her finger.
Mm-hmm. Which is, made up, right? And Balthasar kind of suspects that something else is going on there, right? But he's not sure. He doesn't know what to do, so he doesn't follow him in there. All right. So he goes in, and this is just the worst, isn't it? Actually, we don't have a question about it, but what happens first between Paris and Romeo? He says, tempt not a desperate man. That's kind of a famous line there. Can we kind of interpret that line? Why does Romeo tell Paris, tempt not a desperate man? He's speaking about himself, right? To Paris. Who's one of the most dangerous people you could run across? Ella?
I would say that he said that because he's already in like a bad state, and he's saying that if Paris like does anything to make him upset, like Paris knows that Romeo already killed Tilbit, so he's saying like don't mess with me because I could kill you too.
That, and he even says, I came here armed against myself, right? Tempt not a desperate man. Like there's someone who doesn't even care about losing his own life is a dangerous person to mess with. And it's true, right? And here we go again, right? Like no matter what he does, he ends up doing something horrible, or something horrible ends up happening, right? So Paris says to himself, right? He realizes who he is. Now he doesn't have, once again, he doesn't have any idea, dramatic irony, why Romeo is there, right? My good gentle youth, tempt not a desperate man, fly hence and leave me. Came here armed against myself. And they fight, and Romeo ends up killing Paris. Oh my God, that's just terrible. Okay, and he says, lay me in the tomb with Juliet. So he lays him down respectfully. And then he realizes who he is, right? And he was supposed to marry Juliet, and he feels kind of terrible about it. But then he goes and he sees Juliet. And of course, the huge dramatic irony here, more than anything else, is that we know that she is alive, right? Gets this next page here. Okay, so he says, death that have sucked the honey of thy breath hath no power yet upon thy beauty. Thou art not conquered. Beauty's ensign still is yet crimson in thy lips and thy cheeks, and death's pale flag is not advanced there. We know why that's the case, right? Because she's still alive, right? Is she beautiful? Yes, but she's even more beautiful. She's unnaturally beautiful in death to Romeo because she really is alive, right? And we just want to yell out to him, right? Why art thou yet so fair? Fair to them meaning a word that means beautiful, right? Shall I believe the unsubstantial death as amorous keeps personifying death, and that lean and horrid monster keeps thee here in the dark to his paramour? For fear of that, I will stay with thee, and never from this palace of dim night depart again. Here I will remain with worms that are thy chambermaids. And he talks on for a little while and says, a dateless bargain to engrossing death, kisses Juliet, takes out the poison. Now, any second, Juliet could wake up, right? If it happened like literally a minute before, right? Come bitter conduct. That's apostrophe there, right? When you address an inanimate object. So he's talking to the poison. Come, unsavory guide, thou desperate pilot, now at once. Run on the dashing rocks, thy seasick, weary bark. Bark is a fish. Excuse me, a ship. Here's to my love. Drinks the poison, and he says, "O true apothecary, thy drugs are quick." In his last words, "Thus with a kiss I die." And if you've ever heard that line before, that's where it's from. Were you thinking the whole time Juliet could wake up and it could be a happy ending? You were thinking that a little bit, weren't you? See Izzy throwing up her hands over here, like, yeah, it's sad, but we knew it was going to happen, right? That's the thing of it. You know it's going to happen, and you still try to hope that it's not going to happen. So Friar Lawrence comes in, talks to Balthazar. They find everything that's happening. Okay. And then, of course, Juliet is still going to wake up, and she does. And at that point, the friar is horrified, right? Where's my Romeo? Friar tries to get her to run off, right? But she's not having that. And horribly takes her own life by what method? Alex.
She used Romeo's dagger to kill herself.
Yes, stabs herself in her heart. And let's see. Her last words, then I'll be brief. Once again, apostrophe, right? When you kind of address an inanimate object. Oh, happy dagger, right? Ironically calling the dagger a happy thing because this is the only way that she can be with Romeo now, truly. This is thy sheath. You know, the sheath is something that you slide a knife into, right? Like a sword you would. Okay, so she's saying she is the sheath for the knife now. Their rust, and let me die. And she stabs herself and she dies. Now, everybody else is left with the aftermath here. Everybody shows up. Friar tells what's happened accurately, right? And we do see that, also we find out that Romeo's mother died. Grief of my son's exile hath stopped her breath. What further woe conspires against me? And the prince says, well, look, and you shall see. Montague and Lord Montague sees what's happened there, right? And they also can kind of tell by the scene that Juliet newly dead, right? In other words, it looks like she was not dead before and she is dead now. Of course, the friar clears all that up, right? I will be brief, and then he talks for like 2 pages. But hey, that's Shakespeare. We know what happened, right? Balthazar confirms it, right? Prince finds out that it's all true, right? Lord Montague says, for I will raise a statue in pure gold of Juliet, right? As rich shall Romeo as by his ladies lie, poor sacrifices of our enmity. And so you see them join hands at the end there. And like the chorus said at the beginning, and like the friar wanted it to be, it does cause peace between the families, right? So there's kind of, I don't know whether you want to call it a silver lining, but it's a little bit of resolution there at the end. And it's a shame that it took this, right? But part of the theme at the end is, that hatred, long hatred between groups of people can sometimes cause really innocent victims, right? So, closing speech by the prince. A glooming peace this morning with it brings. The sun for sorrow will not show his head. Go hence to have more talk of these sad things. Some shall be pardoned and some punished, for never was a story of more woe than this of Juliet and her Romeo. And that might kind of sound familiar too, right? So I think we know who died and how. Someone will kind of just review that, just to kind of look back over the, the last half of the play on number 7 on that last question there. Number 6, of course, is all are punished, right? Everyone has been punished. But last question there. All right, Ella, finish us off there.
All right, so the people that died in the tragedy, first Paris dies because him and Romeo fought, and they fought because Paris realized that Romeo was the one who killed his love's cousin, Tilbit. And then Romeo had killed himself with the poison because he found out Juliet had died, but he didn't know that she was actually alive, and he didn't want to live without her. And then Juliet woke back up to find Romeo dead. She tried to kiss him to get some of the poison off his lips and hoped that it would kill her, but it didn't. So she grabbed a dagger and stabbed herself, and that was the cause of her death too.
Yeah, good detail that we missed before. Yeah, she tries to take the poison and get the last bits of it, but there's not enough left. Can we back up even earlier in the play? So by this tragedy, we mean like the whole play, like Shakespeare's tragedy, Romeo and Juliet.
Oh.
So rewinding even before this, can someone fill in
Okay.
who? Yeah, who else died before? Elizabeth, can you go ahead? Was that a hand? No. Who else died? Just to kind of review. All right, go ahead, Ellen.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure the first person that died was Mercito. I don't know how to pronounce his name.
Mercutio.
Yeah, but he died because him and Tilbit were fighting,
Right.
and then Tilbit died because Romeo had killed him.
Exactly. Right.
And then I think that's all that died.
Yep, I think that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So Mercutio, who's a relative of the prince, right? Tybalt, who was a Capulet. Paris, who was another relative of the prince, right? And you might notice in the prince's speech, like toward the end, he says, and I myself have lost a brace of kinsmen. Okay, we forget he had 2 different nephews get killed through this. Paris and Mercutio are both nephews of his. So he's lost a lot too. And then everything we already talked about. Okay, that's it, guys. I think one more thing that I'm going to do to kind of just feel like we've like kind of culminated here is I kept trying to show videos and then wasn't working very well, and I think I'm gonna put up a little extra credit project. I haven't decided what it'll be, but I'll definitely make it worth your while to watch the Claire Danes Leonardo DiCaprio Romeo and Juliet film. I don't think any of you had watched it, if any, few, but there's different, you have to figure out a way to access it through, Amazon or Apple or Netflix or whatever you do. And then I'll have some kind of handout that'll ask you to kind of review and compare what Baz Luhrmann, the director of that film, does with that, and kind of what you think he was trying to do, and whether you liked it or not, and why. And it'll be totally optional. And if you have a high A, and many of you do, then you certainly don't need to worry about it. Or you could certainly take the opportunity to watch the film and not do the extra credit. I would hope that you'd watch it just to enjoy it, because I think you'll really appreciate it. It's modernized, but the dialogue is the original play. Not every single word of it, but the dialogue that is used is straight from the play, and it is the great majority of it. They shortened it a little bit to make it a movie length, they could put in the actual cinema. So I'll probably post that later today. Otherwise, if you get your paper turned in, folks, you are done, and we'll touch base tomorrow about that project, anything else that's going on, and then Thursday we probably won't have a live session. So thank you for all your hard work, appreciate it, and see you tomorrow.